back live with Andrew Bolt with the Bolt Report.
Labor leader Bill Shorten today backtracked on one of his strangest policy promises. Yesterday he said a Labor government would give a 20% pay rise to childcare workers who work in centres in the private sector. Their bosses now don't have to pay, the government will. And Shorten suggested that other people in other private sectors, maybe even aged care workers, would also get a pay rise, not from their bosses, but from the government.
Well, we have picked childcare workers to go first. I think this is a strategically important industry.
But then, today, Bill Shorten said, well, no, childcare workers would not just be the first, but the last to get his government pay rise for private sector workers.
So the model in which we're going to finally sort out the underpayment of early childhood educators is a model, a template which we will only use in childcare.
Joining me is the panel, Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching and Liberal Senator James Paterson. Labor Senator Penny Wong yesterday on AM also suggested that aged care workers would be next to get a government-funded pay rise in the private sector. Why the change today?
Well, I think that there was a decision, the policy has always been that childcare workers, because they are educators, educating the young, we know that that in fact education received very early on in life actually sets people up for life. So that is a very important sector that has also been denied pay rises and pay equity for a long, long time. In fact, for most of its existence, I would say.
But why the change in policy?
I think that, well, I don't know if there has been a change, that there was just a, you know, that it was decided, the policy was announced, that's the policy.
There's two options here, Andrew. One is that we've had yet another stuff up from Bill Shorten on the campaign trail, which his colleagues and he himself has had to clarify within 24 hours, or they are planning to roll out this extraordinary, unprecedented, radical intervention in the childcare sector to other sectors. I have no confidence, if Bill Shorten becomes Prime Minister and they successfully implement this childcare policy, that it won't be extended to other industries like aged care, because the arguments that they're making about the childcare sector do apply to other sectors. So if the government's going to tax some citizens in order to pay private workers higher salaries and regulate the businesses and make sure they pay those higher salaries in one industry, why would it stop there?
I don't get it either. I think, but I don't know that it was just a Bill Shorten stuff up, because, as I said, Penny Wong also said it yesterday. That
but I think it's easy to critique and go through policies when policies are released. And of course, the government hasn't really released, the coalition has not released policies really at all. It's very hard to, you know, to go through a policy document when nothing's been released.
Maybe, but I find it
Andrew,
really interesting.
We've got a comprehensive policy document. It's known as the budget. It was released not that long ago, and it sets out detailed plans for the next 4 years in every area: health, education, tax, childcare. There is not an area untouched by the budget.
The Liberals today also had a tricky issue to deal with, and that is making a deal on preferences with Clive Palmer, who's pretty discredited as a businessman according to a lot of people. He dudded his own workers, say unions. Here's Bill Shorten today.
A vote for Morrison is a vote for Hanson and Palmer, and it's a vote for chaos, chaos, chaos.
You get his preferences, great, particularly in Queensland, help you save some seats. But the moral taint might really hurt you.
Well, Andrew, in almost every single seat that the Liberal Party contests of the 151 House of Representatives seats, our preferences will never be distributed because we will finish either first or second. And in those few seats where they will be distributed, that we'll be choosing, unfortunately, between the Labor Party or the Greens. But I won't be taking any elections from Bill or Kimberley on preferences when, until today, in the seat of Goldstein, the Labor Party was preferencing someone who believes that Jewish people are the descendants of lizards and have a secret plot to control the world.
So's the Queen. It's not just Jews, it's also the Queen.
That's true, yeah. There are many descendants of lizards.
Shifting lizard creatures.
The Labor Party was preferencing until today.
Speaking of that, I'll play you some grabs in a minute, but what's your response on the Palmer front?
Preferences have a symbolic value as well as an actual effect. And the fact is that the Liberal Party, so the LNP, and I did love Scott Morrison saying, oh, that National Party deal with One Nation, that's well over there, they're nothing to do with us, nothing to see here, move it along. I mean, the LNP in Queensland is one party, they've been in coalition together for, 60 years. they're pretty much one party. So preferencing to one nation, preferencing to Clive Palmer brings further chaos into a Senate that James and I can both attest sometimes is kind of beyond crazy.
Kimberley, if there is
you know that you are giving Clive Palmer a free ride into the Senate, really, at the expense of your third Senate candidate in Queensland.
Kimberley, if preferences are intended to have a symbolic effect, what was the symbolic intention that you had in preferencing a lizard conspiracy theorist in
look, the lizard conspiracy. I love the lizard David Icke
There's some symbolic purpose according to Kimberley. I don't know what it is.
I think more important is that Labor preferencing the Greens. We can say all we like about Clive Palmer being an unethical businessman. In the view of some, I'm not endorsing that, but that's the view. He dudded his workers of their entitlements is another view. But I don't know that his policies would wreck the country. Like, you don't like the guy, but I'm not sure about the policies. The Greens, however, they could be saints, but saints can wreck the country with their policies. You're preferencing them.
And in 2010, the Liberal Party preferenced Adam Band above the ALP, thereby setting him up to be returned.
Bad. I criticise that.
I'm happy to say, put my hand on heart, that was a mistake. We should never have done that. We've learned from our lessons. It's now time for the Labor Party to learn, because not only are they preferencing the Greens, Andrew, everywhere, they're also preferencing them in Macnamara, Melbourne's most Jewish seat. Now, the Greens, as Kimberley knows and has made very eloquent arguments about, is a party beset with anti-Semitism, a crisis of anti-Semitism. And what's the Labor Party's symbolic gesture going to be in Macnamara? To preference the Greens.
Look, I think the Greens have got a real problem with the anti-Israel movement there, and I do think it's wrong for Labor to play footsies with the Greens, but there you go. Back to Labor, why can't you put a cost on your global warming policies? It's been 3 weeks nearly of this campaign.
Yes.
Here's Labor Environment spokesman Mark Butler today saying, no, we actually can't come up with the price. Here you go.
It is impossible to cost this, because a Labor government, led by Bill Shorten and Tanya Plibersek, would not be imposing a direct carbon price on businesses.
But we're also talking about what's the cost in terms of the hit to the gross national product, you know, our growth.
I think there was, in that press conference, there was a question around, you know, the costings, and I think we are hardwired to think of costings as budget costings, or costings that might be done by the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Office, those sort of costings. The costings is around, so in fact we are implementing something that is still in the Coalition's very bizarre ad hoc kind of energy policy, which is the safeguards mechanism, which was proposed by Malcolm Turnbull. I mean, I know that he was
I'm still not getting an answer.
He was last year's Prime Minister.
I just want to know, what's it going to cost us, because economists have done it, in wages and the growth figures.
But what's it going to cost for not actually developing technology in the renewable space?
That's an imponderable. I just want to know the cost of this policy on the economy.
Well, it is possible to cost, Andrew. It's, in fact, relatively straightforward to do. Economists have models which attempt to do this all the time. Warwick McKibben has come up with one very scary number,
Brian
hundreds
Fisher,
of billion dollars.
Another one.
Brian Fisher has come up with even more hundreds of billions of dollars. It's very possible to cost, both in a budget sense or in an economic sense. The Labor Party is refusing to do either.
It's a huge policy that you haven't given a costing on.
And both McKibben and Fisher, but well, particularly McKibben, because he's written about this in the last few days, has said that there is negligible difference between the Coalition's policy and the ALP's.
I find that extremely hard to believe on these grounds. Labor's policy involves cutting 4 times more emissions than the Liberal policies if you start from now. 4 times more. Don't go back to the past. If you start now, 4 times more in just 11 years. That's got to come at a cost. But listen, we talked about shape-shifting lizard creatures like the Queen, etc., etc. And speaking of global warming, there's so many mad theories about the dangers and all this kind of stuff and how to save us. I want to play you the maddest. Dr. Young-Hae Chi, who's a professor at Oxford Oriental Institute, has written a book saying aliens started to abduct and to breed with humans in the 1950s, just as global warming was taking off. A coincidence? Not at all. Here he is, just a couple of years ago, explaining this theory.
Why did aliens, we can ask, embark on abduction and hybrid project only in the latter half of the 20th century? What I suggest here is that they started it as a response to the rapidly aggravating environmental condition of this planet. What it suggests is that, on the one hand, aliens were watching us drifting towards a kind of environmental catastrophe, and on the other hand, they began to massively interfere with human affairs.
Reasonable?
I mean, it's a compelling theory, Andrew. I mean, the professor sounds like he would be a walk-up start for pre-selection in the Labor Party in the Northern Territory.
In the Greens.
Where the number two candidate of the Northern Territory for the Labor Party has very similar views to the professor. So he would be a walk-up start.
Just quickly, the Japanese emperor today stepped down. He's 85. He says he's too old to keep being emperor. His son will take over from tomorrow. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's interesting given that really Japan post-Second World War is really a fantastic example of countries that were former enemies being able to work together. And of course, from 1945 to 1952, until the Treaty of San Francisco was signed, we were able to really reconstruct and help.
And it was done under the figurehead of this emperor, who takes a lot of credit for giving Japan the stability. Kimberley, Kitching and James Paterson, thanks so much to you both. More after the break.